Set. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. This is not a public hearing, but the MBTA will be doing a presentation, and people are going to be given the opportunity to voice their opinions. First of all, I just want to say that you have Councilor Buzzy Barton, who is here tonight, Councilors Brian Field, Brian LaPierre, Rick Starboard, Fred Hogan, and State Representative Laurie Ehrlich is here, and also Rich Colucci, who's sitting way in the back there. So also tonight from the MBTA is Angel Donahue Rodriguez, Eric Berkman, Robert Guptill, Erica Baker, Kate Benish, and Adam Camus. Right, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Close enough, we're good.
All right. Close enough? Okay. So I want to thank them for coming here tonight. I know Ned Shinnick and Jim Brienzo are here from the Parking Commission. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the MBTA and allow them to do their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your busy lives to be here. We're happy to be here, and I know coming out of the Traffic Commission last September 17th, I think there was very clearly a call for a public meeting, and so we're only too happy to follow up on that promise. Before we start, there's two things I just want to do. One, I just want my staff again to raise their hands so you can see everyone from here from the T. I imagine we'll go through the meeting, take public comment, and I know there's usually a desire as well to have a more detailed conversation with the MBTA as well, so we're happy to make ourselves available for that. And then two, before we start, if there's a need for translation services, is our translator here? Should be here soon. Does anyone need Espanol? All right, if anyone is aware or they have a partner who needs simultaneous translation, we will have a translator here shortly.
I'm also bilingual, so translator's not here right away.
Yeah, do you want to
Si
ask?
alguien necesita un traductor, por favor venga al lado mío y yo lo puedo ayudar. Gracias.
I would also like to point out that Megan Hamill is here representing the mayor's office. So the mayor's office is represented here tonight.
Great. Can everyone hear me? That was the problem last time. Excellent. I'm sitting down, which is unusual for presentation, but this way I can click and you can get the microphone. But I will, the plan here is, so again, my name is Kat Benish. I'm the Chief of Operations Strategy, Policy, and Oversight. I grew up in Marblehead. I take the bus every day. I have a layover spot in front of my house. I know these issues very well, and I'm very grateful for growing up and having the team my entire life. I would like to talk to basically three things with this time. One is I'd like to explain basically transit in Lynn overall, just to situate the Better Bus project. Two, I'd like to explain the Better project, which precipitated and caused this change and the need of the layover space. And then three, I wanted to walk through the options that we're considering for a layover space. I also want to start off this meeting very clearly in saying that there have always been three options at the table. The first option was the one of using the triangle. And based on the feedback we have heard at the Traffic Commission on 9/17, and we have heard since then, we are taking the triangle essentially off the table. We have basically heard that there is very strong opposition to that. And we try to be responsive as possible to public feedback as we can, and we thank you all for taking time out of your days to provide that feedback. However, and we're glad we can come to this agreement and work with you all, and the city, and the council, and the Traffic Commission, and the Lynn delegation. And thank them all for their input and help over these past few weeks as well, since they've been very much helpful. With that, though, there's still a need for a layover space, and would like to go through what we think the other two real options are, and that if we can't reach an option, what the alternative would be. So that's my intent, and then I believe the City Council has questions, and then very, very happy to take any of your public comment. But again, option one, essentially, we would say at this point is really off the table. So just as context, Lynn to us to the MBTA is a very important place. And while we talk about the Better Bus project and what's going on, I do want to say that Lynn is constantly a lot of the MBTA's planning and investments for the future of transit. So as an example of that, of things you might be hearing going on at the same time, just so you understand the context, is Lynn is what's considered a priority place for us. So we recently finished our strategic planning vision up to 2040, and in it we identified a number of what we call priority places. Lynn is one of those, and there's actively a Lynn Transit Action Plan going on right now with many of the same people you see around the room, including Senator Crichton, Representative Cahill, to try to come up with other ways to improve transit to Lynn. Whether, I know people have talked about the Blue Line extension, ferry, better bus, but a number of options that group is actively going on. Two, there's also been a lot of efforts recently about bus stop consolidation. And Eric Berkman, who is right there raising your hand, you may have seen in the past, has been working tirelessly with the City of Lynn and the Traffic Commission to essentially consolidate bus stops. And up to now, I believe up to at least 31 parking spaces have been restored to the City of Lynn as we try to consolidate bus stops. As often bus stops are as close as 100 feet, which isn't effectual for anyone. And so that's been going on, and that's, I think, a very positive story as well. There's the Better Bus Project, which I'll talk about shortly. And then finally, Rail Vision, which is another ongoing strategic plan that's trying to re-envision really how do we provide commuter rail service to not only Lynn, but the greater Boston area and all the way out to Worcester, et cetera. So just placing in context of bus is one thing, but when we think about transit and we think about Lynn, there's a lot of different things going on, all trying to improve transit for you, your fellow community members, siblings, parents, et cetera. So when we talk about the Better Bus Project, we're really excited about this. And I think I talked briefly about this for those of you who were at the Traffic Commission on September 17th. The Better Bus Project is essentially where we are now, is the culmination of an 18-month outreach process and analytics process where there's been a lot of effort putting into saying, how do we improve our bus service? We know it is not good enough. I think by our service delivery policy, which has a number of metrics, we fail on many accounts, and we know that. And so one of our main goals that we kicked off 18 months ago is saying, how do we start improving bus service? We started first with doing a number of cost-neutral changes. What can we do right now to essentially restore the foundation of bus service, and then talk about longer term, how can we invest more service? The first of these changes went into effect on September 1st. The remainder of these changes will go into effect on December 22nd. And we're also adding in additional bus operators. We're re-envisioning our network plan. So really what happened on September 1st is the beginning of a lot of investment into bus that we're very excited and very proud about, all of trying to improve bus service. Now, all of these changes are basically also trying to do, and I meant to say this, is that when we did our first round of outreach to the public, the two things we heard very clearly from the public is we want more frequency and we want more reliable buses. When we hear from people and how people plan their days using public transit, it is those two factors, frequency and reliability. So when we instituted all of these Better Bus changes, of which affected 53 routes across the system, it was all trying to improve frequency and reliability. So one of those changes, which went into effect on September 1st, was the change to the 448, 449, 441, and 442. As you may or may not be aware, on September 1st, and again, this went through a fairly lengthy public process, and I believe there was a public meeting in Lynn in February to review this, was the idea that we're going to take the 448 and 449, which we were realizing they were getting stuck in traffic after Wonderland trying to get into Boston. It was a more expensive fare, and they're spending forever getting into Boston. And we realized that we could provide much better service, it'd be both faster and cheaper for everyone, if we terminated all of our 440 buses essentially at Wonderland. We also recently added capacity on the Blue Line. We run an additional train there as part of the Chelsea Viaduct project, so there is more capacity there. And we realized by stopping buses at Wonderland and turning them back, we could provide more frequent service to everyone along essentially that line, which is said here. And through this, we believe that more than 97% of the riders on the 441, 442 corridor now have more frequent service, which we think is great. And while we were doing these analytics, we realized that on the 441, 442, which is one of our highest ridership routes in the Boston area, is that 25% of the riders on the 441 and 442 live between Central Square and New Ocean Street. And so originally, we were planning to what we call short turn. We have buses that go all the way to Marblehead and Swampscott, And we have buses that go, also 441, 442, that used to just go to Central Square. And we realized that 25% of our riders, 25% of that 3,800 riders, live between Central Square and New Ocean Street. And we realized if we ran those buses to essentially New Ocean and Ocean Street, we can provide higher frequency by 50% to 25% of our riders. We're really like, this is super exciting. We're thrilled to be able to provide this additional service in a way that is actually cost neutral. So the details of that is we added 47 weekday trips for riders. It's improved frequency. And what this, though, means, though, is we're doing something that we never did before. We're now, rather than turning around buses in Lynn Central, we're now turning around buses around Ocean and New Ocean Street, because we now have buses that used to go to Central Square go all the way now to the New Ocean Triangle. So that's essentially the trade-off. With additional frequency, we now need a place to turn around buses. Now, so the need from the MBTA in order to provide this higher frequency is to essentially we need 90 to 100 feet for about 1 to 2 buses to do what we call what's a layover. And what that means is we basically, at the end of every scheduled run, put about 5-10 minutes for buses to essentially park, get a chance to reset their schedules so they can start their next trip on time. And what that means is then the next buses going around that are coming inbound to Boston are more reliable as well. So I'm going to stop there for a second because I realize I tend to talk very fast and get into a lot of details, and I apologize. I'm working on it. But the key takeaway here is the Better Bus Project is the first time we've done a major service change plan to the MBTA since 2008. What it means is we're providing more frequent and more reliable bus service to people around the area. And in particular to Lynn, it means we've added bus service to Lynn in what is the highest ridership corridor, which to us is like amazing. And what it means, though, is there's a need for new space in order to park buses briefly as well as turn them around. So, we believe there were 3 options for this layover space. Options 1, 2, and 3, if you can see up there. 1 is the John Flanagan Triangle, which I said is at this point, I think based on the feedback, we're taking off the table. And the remainder then is at Ocean Street and Ocean Terrace, and New Ocean Street at Ocean Street. And I'll walk through those with pictures so you can see them. So option 1, again, is the triangle. We originally thought this would be one of the best options because there were no direct abutters. It'd be taking some of the fewest parking spaces. And the parking spaces when we were looking at the parking weren't always fully at capacity. However, we heard the drawbacks, and I'm just going to move past this one. Option 2 that we're proposing is at Ocean Street at Ocean Terrace. I think it's right across from the funeral home, and it would basically be 70 feet behind, I think what's now a hair salon or a Boost Mobile, and 40 feet ahead of it. And I think it would require about 5 parking spaces. The abutters on that street do have access to off-street parking, and it does provide us enough space. So that's one of the options that we're now considering to propose to the Traffic Commission that would allow for us to lay over buses that wouldn't then require us to be on the triangle. And so that would be directly, the way that would is the buses would come down on the route if they're during the short term, and right before they get to the triangle, they would essentially, if they're a short trip, they would essentially park there. And I will say technically all of our buses should be turning off, not idling. That is our policy, though we do realize in the winter and for very short trips that isn't always the case, which is something we're actively trying to work on. But it will likely be a mixture of, frankly, ideally just parking, but recognize there may be some idling. So it would be the buses coming into the triangle, they would park there, they would then go around the triangle and then start their route back towards Wonderland. Option 3 is at New Ocean Street and Ocean Street, which would essentially be after they come around the triangle and right before they get to the funeral home. And essentially be 80 feet, and again, enough space there for 2 buses. Again, abutters have access to off-street parking. I think it's only another 4. Okay, thank you. There would be about 4 to 5 parking spaces, and they would, it would just be right after the triangle. And so that's the other option we're considering. So I think the 2 options we'd really like to hear feedback on today is options 2 and option 3. I will say we also did a lot of effort looking at other options. We actually brought a bus out there, testing the streets, looking at parking and thinking, are there any options we could potentially use? And just to run through them, just so you're aware of the diligence that's occurred, is first we looked at Monument Avenue in Swampscott. Very likely a similar situation in sort of view sheds, but the challenge with the Monument Ave that we identified is because it is a roughly 4 to 5 minute drive loop, the way that the T thinks about it is we consider every second precious, and essentially we would have to then reduce frequency by about 10%, which for us is when there's an option to essentially lay over en route, that is a poor use of our assets, which are meant to serve all of you and all the other riders, because it would essentially decrease the amount of service we can offer. We also looked at up Sanderson Avenue near if I can keep going, near Kiley Park. But if we go down Sanderson Avenue, it's a very narrow street, and it requires to take parking along one of the entire street sides and to be right next to a park, and that was a concern as well. So we took that one off the table. We also looked at New Ocean and Ocean Street doing basically a clockwise turn, and we realized with the buses that our buses actually couldn't make that turn, so that took us a number of other options off the table. And then finally, I think there's been some raise in some ways what we're doing now out of pure necessity is laying over what we consider our revenue bus stops. That we consider unsafe and impractical because it means when another bus comes, and other buses will come because we have buses going all the way to Swampscott and Marblehead, that means the buses are going to have to let their passengers off into the road and not on a sidewalk, and that doesn't meet what we would like to provide for accessibility as well as safety. So we don't consider that an option either. So it's suffice to say is we're always happy to talk through other options and hear what the public and the City Council and everyone has to say, but also recognizing that there are serious operational constraints based on the fact that we're talking about 40-foot buses and very narrow streets. And that's why we did our due diligence, and we really do believe option 2 and 3 are the best options. If we can't find an option that allows us to lay over buses, then I think the only option that we're able to really consider, and we'd really, really prefer not to do this because of how many people benefit from the service, is we'd have to essentially turn around our buses back in Central Square, which would mean a 50% reduction of service. It would mean a 50% reduction of service for 25% of the riders of the 441 and the 442, which represents one of our highest ridership routes in the MBTA, and is what we'd consider also minority and low-income route, or carries passengers. So with that, I'm going to stop and say what we'd like to hear today is your feedback on options 2 and 3. And again, the intent here, what we'd really like to do is be able to continue to provide higher frequency and higher reliability service to the citizens of Lynn and the residents of Lynn. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your time.
Before we go any further, I just would like to point out that the mayor is here, Tom McGee is here right now. So is there any more from the MBTA? Would you like to say anything else?
I think we covered it, and again, our intent in all of this is to make sure we can help provide service to the residents and to the riders.
Pardon. We also have Hong Net here tonight. So if you're going to ask a question, please come to the podium, okay?
Hi, I'm Dawn Jenkins. I live at 33 Eastern Avenue. One of the issues that I personally have as a former bus operator for the MBTA is the idling enforcement, because I know it doesn't occur. I'm not sure what's happened in the last few years, but it's not enforced. Second of all, in the wintertime, when the buses take that left-hand turn onto Ocean Street from Eastern Avenue, in a snowstorm, all we hear is spinning tires, and I'm calling constantly the DPW because the buses are stuck. So when you talk about you can't take a left down a Sanderson or Superior, it's the same issue taking that left-hand turn. The cars always have to back up, whether it's a snowstorm or dry pavement, when they take that left. We've been complaining about that intersection for other issues for a very long time because it's dangerous to begin with. The other thing is, you say you've increased service by decreasing the 48 and the 49 just between Central Square and Ocean Street. Well, what happens when that excess amount of people get to, don't they need to go to Haymarket? Don't they need to go to Wonderland? My son is experiencing that issue. He gets the first the 441 at 5:36 in the morning, then he has to go down and wait for the 426. So you've increased bus service in that perimeter, but you haven't expanded it otherwise. So it's just accommodating only the people that need to go from Ocean Street to Central Square. And as far as, laying over on either one of those areas, I don't have an issue with it because I don't see it. But my issue is the idling and them taking the left-hand turn. And also, the person who's in charge of the signs that say no idling, they put it in the wrong spot. It should be at the bus stop where they lay over at the funeral parlor, not where the bus stop used to be. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Brenda Suffield. I live at 15 Eastern Avenue. I've lived there since 1978, but I've also lived in other metropolitan cities in the United States and in North America. My question is, what is the size of the fleet of the MBTA buses?
What is your question?
What is the size of the fleet? How many buses?
How many buses?
do you have?
We have about 1,000 buses, give or take.
How many of those buses are diesel?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we could get that.
Do you have any hybrid buses?
We do, and we're actively buying more.
Okay, do you have any propane?
We have a few CNG buses right now.
In the plan that you have for a better bus project, are you going to include more eco-friendly buses instead of these diesel buses and idling?
So I think this is probably a comment for everyone, and I think to some degrees I do a lot of service delivery. I cannot speak to our entire fleet and facilities plan, but I can say, and we're happy to find a way to make available to everyone, our current fleet and facility plan, and we are actively buying additional hybrid fleets, which will be retiring, I believe, some diesel buses, and are currently testing out battery electric buses right now as we speak. I believe we have 5 on site, and depending on how those tests go, because of the winter, potentially exploring our opportunity to move to fully electric. But our goal right now is to move away from diesel and into hybrid.
Right, and I think when you're talking to all these stopovers and that's a big question because these buses are diesel. They smell, and there's a lot of bad effluent coming from the buses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Bridget Brewer, and I live at 54 Ocean Street, directly where option 2 and right across from the street from option 3. I am absolutely not in favor of either option. I appreciate the time that you've put into this and appreciate you being here. I know it's not easy to be on your side. But unfortunately, what happened recently is a bus stop was actually placed directly in front of my TV room window. We have no front lawn, so there are strange people standing right outside of my window at all times during the day, and it is a little scary. It's also extremely loud with the buses. I can hear them all the way in the back of my house. And having buses sitting out there for however long is not something that would be feasible for me and, I'm sure for neighbors as well. The other issue is that it has taken a lot of parking from the residents in where I am, next door to us, as well as a few stores that are right around us. And the only parking that it is leaving right now is a tiny little bit where that 70-foot piece is, and it's frequent for accidents. So that's the only spot they've left us for parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for hosting this meeting tonight. My name is Hunter Richard. I formerly live at Ocean Terrace, now at Greystone Park, just around the corner. And I'm very happy to hear that the service is increasing for the corridor. I would just like to say that currently turning right from Ocean Terrace onto Ocean Street is challenging due to the sight lines, and I'm concerned with the bus layover facility being right there, that turn. So I ask if there will be any efforts to improve sight lines in terms of curbing. In addition, the turn of Ocean Street and New Ocean Street, that curve there's no sidewalk, and the sidewalk is very wide, so I worry. I walk to the train every morning in Swampscott, and it's very challenging to navigate that, and with the bus parked there, I worry about the sight line, and if any efforts with the Traffic Commission will try to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lauren Bateman, and I live at 4749 Ocean Street. Some people here know me well because I've been dealing with the MBTA for the past year when a bus stop got moved in front of my house. And I know the MBTA had asked me about if they could idle the buses in front of my house, and I said that I would prefer that that not happen. One, for the same reason that a lot of people were here for the island. I have one of the few houses on Ocean Street that actually has a beautiful ocean view. And instead of having a nice ocean view like the woman at 54 Ocean Street, we instead had people coming up to our windows, looking in the windows, smoking. I myself am a cancer survivor, so would have never bought a house with a bus stop in front of it for the fumes and the smoking, etc. One question I have for you, because while we understand the need for a strong public transportation system, my fiance takes public transit to get into Boston, what I'm concerned is idling in a residential area. So I have gone out at 5:30 in the morning from my house in my PJs to ask the bus operators to turn off their buses when they were idling in front of my house. The bedrooms for my tenants are in the front of the house, and sometimes they're there as late as 11 o'clock at night, at which point I did go out and ask the bus drivers to please turn their engines off. One option that I don't know why it wasn't considered, and maybe you've looked at it, is that right up the street we have the Swampscott commuter rail, which is not a residential area. It is an MBTA-owned property. I didn't know, is there a possibility for the bus to idle at a train station versus outside of residential houses?
So in speaking of that, I think it would be the same response. So two comments. One, I realize back and forth Q&A. I apologize that we're not responding to everyone's questions, but we'll try to respond in the course of the evening. As for there was one comment earlier saying all the buses, the 441, 442, just so it's clear, they are going all the way to Wonderland. There are no buses that should be stopping in Central Square. They should be going all the way to Wonderland, to I believe, the first commenter's comment. To looking at Swampscott and the commuter rail, my hunch is on this one, and I'll have to defer to the team to confirm this exactly, is it would be a very similar situation as going to Monument Ave, is that technically I cannot speak to whether or not we can make or may not make that route, but because it would essentially lengthen the time it takes buses to travel, it would mean we are then reducing the frequency that we'd be serving on the route of the 441, 442. And the challenge we face is because we have limited resources right now, we literally can't put another bus on the streets during peak service. When we think about adding a bus or moving a bus, it's not just in the 441 or 442, but we're also thinking about how we apply buses in Chelsea, how we apply buses in Revere, Somerville, Quincy. And so if we're basically taking buses essentially out of revenue service to make them travel farther, I think we'd have to have a serious conversation about, is this the best use of assets that are meant to serve the taxpayers?
Right, and I think we're trying to find a win-win for both the MBTA and the residents that live in the area, and while we understand that you're trying to increase ridership, which is fantastic. Like, you mentioned Monument, that it would see a decrease in 10%, which means you still improved ridership by 30 to 40% or whatever the number was. Like I said, I live at 4749 Ocean Street. I have a front view. I work from home a lot, so I have a front view to the happenings. I get to watch the buses pull over. I get to watch them when they're sitting in front of my house. That intersection is a nightmare. If anyone knows the intersection at the top of the hill, I've seen clusters of buses trying to make that turn. It is a very bad intersection in general, but the bus stop, the commuter rail, in terms of driving, because I've driven there myself, like I said, to pick up my fiance, takes me about 2 minutes there and about 2 minutes back. Maybe it would add about 5 minutes to the route of the bus stop, and I know that you're trying to do this as quickly and efficiently as possible, but to provide a win-win for both the MBTA and the people who live in the neighborhood, is that something that we can consider? So that, I mean, I've gotten a headache in my living room just listening to buses idling. It's that bad. And they're not, they're not turning off the engines. And like you said, when winter comes, I doubt they're gonna turn off the engines, because who wants to be cold when it's minus 20 outside? So that's something I would strongly like the MBTA to consider. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Good evening. My name is James Sexton. I live on King Street in Lynn. First of all, I want to thank the MBTA for having the sense to remove the triangle layover. It is a pristine area of Lynn. And what we don't want in that neighborhood are buses idling, which they will, regardless of your priority, during the winter or the summer. Lynn Shore Drive and Swampscott Beach, Kings Beach and Swampscott, are utilized year-round by walkers. Heavier population in the summer, of course, but taking that off the table is certainly a good step. However, when you discussed the triangle, I believe you said that you preferred that area at first because of the lack of abutters on the side that the bus would be parking on. And yet now we have option 2 and option 3 with abutters on both sides of the street. And I believe you also said that the layover time would be about 5 to 10 minutes at those areas. I applaud the previous speaker to me for bringing up the Swampscott train station. The Swampscott train station is MBTA property, and I will give you precisely how you can get there and what you can do. When a bus comes down through the triangle, the bus takes a left onto Eastern Avenue. The bus continues up Eastern Avenue for approximately a quarter to a third of a mile. The bus takes a right onto Columbia Avenue. At the end of Columbia Avenue is one side of the Swampscott train station with a parking lot that is big enough to support 1 or 2 buses, although the drivers may have to move if somebody were to want to get in or out of their car. Since there is both an ingress and an egress from that parking lot without requiring the bus to turn around, the bus could come out, take a left back down Columbia Avenue to Eastern Avenue. And lo and behold, I think you might be aware that most transit systems have the ability to have a bus operate a traffic light. So that you put a traffic light for buses only at Eastern and Columbia, which allows that bus to make a left turn onto Eastern Avenue, back down to the triangle where it takes a right, comes up to the top of the triangle and takes a left onto Ocean and Lewis Streets. Total trip time, 5 to 10 minutes. You don't have to idle anywhere. Another thing that occurs to me, the tea isn't enough hot water with everyone these days, but it has always amazed me that we have 2 bus lines, one on Essex Street going to Salem and Lynn, and one on Essex Street going to Sanderson. 2 on Humphrey, Paradise, especially Paradise, going to Swampscott, Marblehead. And halfway between both, there's a train station, commuter rail. But the two fiefdoms can't seem to get it together so that you could arrange train times or bus times and make mass transit work so that people don't have to drive to the train station. They can jump on a bus and get delivered there. There's another reason why Monument Ave won't work, frankly, because Swampscott would never allow what you're proposing. It won't work in Marblehead because Marblehead won't allow what you're proposing. The lack of options considered shows the inadequacy of the planning. If you really want to address your customers, our city, our environment, get clean buses that don't need to idle, and have the T Board of Directors make that a priority. But in the meantime, if you substitute the Swampscott train station for option 2 or option 3, you have no layovers. You have simply a turnaround where you're not boarding or disgorging passengers along Eastern Avenue and along Columbia Avenue. You're not picking up and discharging passengers. And that trip is going to take you 5 to 10 minutes. No more idling. And although it's a priority, picture yourselves as a bus driver. It's 98 degrees in the shade down by the beach, including where option 2 and 3 are located, a block away. The bus driver isn't going to sit there without air conditioning on. On the opposite end of the spectrum, it's 20 degrees, sometimes lower, and the northeast wind howls down to Ocean Street. A bus driver is not going to sit there for 5 or 10 minutes in those temperatures with the heat turned off. And frankly, if you required it, unsafe working conditions. But I urge you to go back to the drawing board, to consider the Swampscott train station. No idling, merely a turnaround on your property. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Hi, my name's John Hazard, and I live on Michigan Avenue. So, what you have up here is proposed option 3. That bus stop, where they're already using it, by the way, and they're idling there, which is, it's actually illegal. The bus is less than 10 feet from the corner, and I got a picture right here that shows you the bus actually hangs out into Michigan Ave by a good 4 or 5 feet, blocking both the entering and exiting Michigan Ave and the crosswalk. So it's not only illegal, it's unsafe. So that should be removed immediately. Option 2 that you have up there, which is on the other side of the street, as you can see by your own drawing, the first one, 70 feet, that space goes into that parking area, the parking lot. If someone's coming out of Ocean Terrace, it's already a blind spot there. If you put a big bus on the corner, once again, you're creating a safety issue because that corner's blind from both Ocean Street coming in, going. So very unsafe. There's no space there. And if you go up to the other spot, That corner's a total nightmare with cars parked there. Never mind if you put a big bus there. So those options just totally unsafe as well as not legal. Listening to the other speakers here, it seems to me that the option of the Swampscott T-stop there, the commuter rail, is already a perfect situation. It seems that your only concern seems to be about turnaround time and frequency. I think in the concerns of safety, I mean, the safety issues far outweigh the T's frequencies. And I don't see it as being like that's not an extra 5 minutes drive. I mean, I can walk there in 5 minutes from my house. So that's not an issue. Monument Ave, probably another good option, but I think you'd have a lot of kickbacks from that. But these options here on Ocean Street, as well as the option that has already been apparently kicked to the curb up by the beach, totally not acceptable, as well as unsafe and illegal. Thank you.
Yes, God bless you. Jeffrey Eric Yaffa from Lynn, Massachusetts. I have a real specific question, okay? And it should not be difficult to answer, but I just wanted to let everybody know here that I know that the whole thing we're discussing is a very touchy issue right now, okay, in a lot of areas. So I'm going to try to be really specific about one question, okay? And, but I do include about the touchiness that I would really like to see in the future, that the MBTA continue to excel and improve and work on the boys having a lot of real manners before they be hired by the personnel department, okay, and they be scrutinized for this. If they're not mannerly and don't know manners, they should not be allowed. The MBTA always operated with boys that drove very mannerly and behaved that way mannerly all the time. Okay, so I don't want anyone getting touchy about this. I would appreciate that in the future, or else they shouldn't be working with the people that work with manners all the time. All right, so this is my question, honest to God. Are we still going to be able to have a public telephone number available, okay, to all of us, where we are able to reach a live MBTA person who will be able to give us an exact guaranteed time, I mean within a minute or two, right, or whatever it may be, under normal circumstances, okay? And I don't want there to be a lot of loose leaf room for that to be interpretive. A real schedule where they come at a guaranteed time. We were able to call and say, what time is the bus coming? For instance, the 441 by Stop and Shop. And okay, in other words, when they get on that phone and say it will be there around approximately 4:20 p.m., that it doesn't turn the sign off over on Salem Street and go by and write out of order and say, oh, well, there was only one person there. We're at one
Jeff,
time.
do you have a question
Yes.
about
Is
Lewis
there going
Street?
to be in the future manners drivers that guarantee that if the people at the office give us a time, that they won't drive by and pretend that they're not an order bus? They had told me that there's some that are called floater buses, but they have buses that are supposed to be guaranteed to come at specific scheduled times. And I'm worried about having a computer voice instead of a live voice. So it's two questions. And if you're not able to answer it, I'd just rather have you say, I think that's very good food for thought, Jeff, that is input, that I would hope we will be able to have a live voice that we reach, not a computer, and that we'll be able to be given a time that they will be coming, and that they will come within that time, okay? And that they continue to work on only hiring people, as they've always done, with real managers, so people aren't touchy with the whole thing. It really needs to be done.
Thank you,
All
Jeff.
right, so thank you all very
Thank you.
much about that, and honest to God, thank you.
Thank you. And to your question, I can't answer that to that degree. But thank you for your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hello.
Please.
Christine Weiland at 7B Lynn Shore Drive. Just one item just to close the loop on the potential to do the Swampscott Rail Station. I definitely appreciate the comment about the buses being able to get up Eastern Ave and take that left. And so one thought is, and I don't know the route completely, but is there an option that they don't even have to turn right onto New Ocean, or I'm sorry, onto, what is that side street by us? New Ocean, right there, by the hair salon and the aesthetics place. Do they even have to go down that way, or could they just continue straight up New Ocean and then go to the Swampscott train station, so then they don't even have to go down Eastern Ave at all, up or down, or deal with any of that, and then just go straight around and loop back and down? And one of the other things with that is maybe there's a potential that there are riders there that would like to get on the bus, but then they just have to walk down and get on the one of the closer stations that they do run to. So you may find that there's an opportunity for riders in that area that doesn't even exist, that you might be able to place a stop at those certain areas to make it a bit more efficient. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, too, I'll add, as a number of comments have come up on this, I cannot speak at this moment, since it's something we'd want to test, to the ability to use the Swampscott commuter rail as a layover spot, but I will promise to this group and the delegation and the council that we'll at least take that and go back and look at it to understand both an operational feasibility. Of course, driving that in a bus is different than driving it in a car, and how long it would take in a bus, and how much that would then imply for frequency reductions, as well as is there actually space to park two buses at the commuter rail stop, while potentially how full the parking lot is. So I can't answer any of those questions now, but I will say we will go look at that at least. And so when we bring the sort of the formal request to the Traffic Commission, we'll have an answer on that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please come to the podium.
Hi, Kat. Thanks for considering the Sanderson Ave option. Appreciate that. At the same time, can you just talk into the mic? Thank you. So I mapped out a number of other potential routes that on the 17th you mentioned that they were on average 4, 8, or 12 minutes. And some of that uses Burrill Street straight away from New Ocean, take a left onto Burrill Street, come back either Columbia Road or go out to Essex Street and back. So I'm a little uncertain about the loss of service that would happen by taking a route to the train station, for example, idling there, and then picking the route back up. If you're trying to kill 4, 8, or 12 minutes, the most of the routes that I mapped are without traffic, and obviously, depending upon the time of day that the route needs to be covered, the time is going to be different, but it looks like there are several possible routes that can consume that 4, 8, or 12 minutes without actually idling. And a number of them on Chatham Street, on Essex Street, already have service, so it's not like you'd be putting a bus on a route that doesn't already have one. And one of the things I think folks in the neighborhood and folks here tonight didn't realize that with the route changes, the frequency of the buses coming through the neighborhood essentially has doubled. And that, in addition to the fact that we've got to idle these buses somewhere in the neighborhood, it's like it's a 1-2 punch in terms of the impact that has to the neighborhood. So. It's great that the triangle is off the table, but I think trying to find routes that can consume that time is a better idea than trying to idle practically anywhere because of the impact that the buses themselves have.
Thank you, and thank you for the suggestions too. We looked at those as well in a lot of the same situations of narrow streets, but I appreciate you sending those along. Particularly to the 4, 8, and 12, I wanted to explain that for the group, that it's what's essential about that is that it's not essentially we quote-unquote need to kill 4, 8, or 12 minutes. What essentially is a complex model is that, without getting into too much detail of, it's basically recovery time A lot the way airlines work, we'll schedule in more time than we think our median runtime will run, knowing that the 90th percentile, or 9 out of 10 times, we're going to take a much longer time so that we can start the next trip on time. So in reality, we might schedule up to 10 to 12 minutes of layover time, but in reality, we will probably be using significantly less than that because of traffic and congestion, and the run times run longer. And so that's really where that time comes from. But thank you for bringing that up, and thank you as well as sending your other ideas.
Hi, Don Jenkins. My question is why, I think you just explained it, why you have 2 buses laying over at the same time. What I've been noticing is since the change has happened is you have buses that are piggybacking each other. Some of them are skipping stops because the guy in front of them is doing a stop, so someone's not adjusting the schedule already according to the added service. Second of all, when is the next meeting? February, you said? Or anything's going to be done?
Traffic Commission meeting is October, I don't know the date off the top of my head.
And so what does that meeting mean to us?
My understanding, and I will also look to the council on this, is fundamentally the Traffic Commission is the process by which there's a formal request for essentially taking parking spaces for the MBTA's use of bus layover space. So the intent of the public comment meeting essentially is to get the public's feedback on what the T's formal recommendation would be. Of course, also working with the mayor's office, city council, and the Lynn delegation to figure out what would be the best option for the overall area.
So basically that's going to be premature considering the fact that we're discussing another option now, right?
I think in 2 weeks will give us enough time to actually look at the schedules as well as get potentially a bus out there to actually run it and check it out to see if we could do it. So I think we can have an answer on that whether or not it's a viable option within 2 weeks, yes.
All right, well, could we see about getting the sign put where it needs to be, where they're idling and laying over right now?
I've took those comments down. I think there's been a number of things that I'd like to bring back to the team so we can start working through them, yes.
And I used to hate when people would ask me this question, but you know, you can always walk up to the bus driver and ask them what their badge number is and take the bus number. And I will certainly do that because there's been many family members that have died of lung cancer in my house, and I don't want to be one of them, nor do I want my neighbors. But thank you very much for everything.
And on that note, you can always reach us, give us feedback at 617-222-3200. We will always take any and all feedback.
Good evening. My name is Marie Mazzio. I live in Medford, Massachusetts, but I'm here in behalf of my tenants. I own the property at 43 Ocean Ave, and I'm here to speak in behalf of them. They're not happy with the buses idling. They're not happy if they're going to lose some parking spots, and the pollution. I've listened to a lot of the people. I feel bad for everybody. I hope the city council, the mayor that's here, and everybody takes into consideration what everybody is saying. I understand that you want to do better time with the service, but I don't think that you can do better time at the expense of everybody's health and safety. And I hope that the people of Lynn and the taxpayers of Lynn that support this city are going to be heard tonight, because it's really important. Safety is much, much more important, and the health of people is more important than time getting me back and forth into work. Get up earlier. It does work, but we should not be doing things at the expense of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Parker. I live at 1 Atlantic Street in Lynn. I'm here actually as a bus rider, not as a resident, not as an MBTA. People are talking as if the MBTA and the residents around the bus stops are the only parties in this. And I, as a daily bus rider, I just wanted to express my gratitude for the improvement in service. I am nothing if not cranky and complaining about the T when it doesn't meet my expectations, and this has exceeded my expectations. I depend on it for work. I do not have a car. I'm sure I'm representative of many residents of Lynn. Because the bus service has improved, I may be able to cut my transit costs in half and no longer have to take commuter rail. It makes the difference. I believe one of the earlier commenters spoke about coordinating times between commuter rail and buses. With the new schedule, it's much more coordinated. Instead of waiting 40 minutes sometimes for a bus because everyone's going back to West Lynn Garage, I only have to wait 10 to 15 minutes at Central Square. So as one of the 25% of the people who are now being served by the buses running to Ocean Avenue, my wish is that we can find a solution that works for everyone. I also live above a bus stop, so I understand that it is noisy, but as somebody who depends on it every day and who's one of the few bus riders here, I'd like to say, please work to find something that makes this possible, because a return to the turnaround at Central Square would be a step backwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Patty Ramstein. I live around the corner in Swampscott on Paradise Road, and I just, listening to this, I know there's no easy answers, and it's a very hard decision, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. When you talked about Superior Street, Sanderson Avenue, Chatham, near Kiley Park, and then people started talking about the Swampscott train station, they're like, right, it's like the same distance up Eastern Avenue. They're like across from each other, so the argument about it being too far away, if you were considering Sanderson, it's the same thing. But on the other side, with the T station, the commuter rail station, excuse me, you have abutters across the street who are not going to like that. Then it's going to be the same thing like it was at the Triangle or any of the other neighborhoods. There are people right across the street who already are distressed about what goes on at the train station. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. Okay, October 15th is when they're going to be having the meeting at the police station again. And as the ward councilor, I just want to say that I first of all appreciate the MBTA coming here tonight, listening to our concerns. And I think that you've realized how important this is to the neighborhood and how organized. It's probably one of the most organized areas in the city where people will come together over an issue. And a lot of things were brought up tonight. I also have a petition of 148 names that are opposed to any bus idling areas in that neighborhood. As we're listening to different people come up and voicing their concerns, I've received over a dozen texts from people who couldn't be here tonight, who wanted to also be in opposition of this. There were a lot of things that were brought up, and I think most importantly, parking is the biggest issue in that neighborhood. Lewis Street, Ocean Street, there are many multi-family houses that don't have parking lots. So you're talking about two idle areas where you're going to be taking away at least 10 spots. Those are very coveted spots. And in the wintertime, what winds up happening is Swampscott does a parking ban, and they don't allow cars from November till April parking on their roadways. That's right on the Lynn Swampscott line. And a lot of those people wind up coming over, parking their cars at night in Lynn, taking spots. One of the big issues that someone brought up is the condition of that hill in the wintertime. No matter how much we plow it, no matter how much we sand it, a bus is just simply not going to be able to make the left turn onto Ocean Street at that location. It does make sense to look at other options, whether it be the Swampscott train station, Central Square in Lynn, and I know there are some people who think that would make them go backwards, but it's obvious that this is not a good idea to put those idle stations in that area. that I hope the MBTA, between now and the October 15th meeting, can look at all options and come up with a better solution to this, whether it be that they add a stop onto the runs or whatever it may be. But it's quite obvious you have about 100 people that are in the room, and I guarantee you that there's at least another 100 that would have been here tonight but couldn't make it. So again, I want to say thank you for coming tonight. October 15th is the next meeting at the... Bob, what time is the meeting on October 15th? 7? 6 o'clock. It's in the community room, Officer Ned Chinook. And if you want to do it here, you might want to do it here.
I was just going to suggest that, as the chairman of the Traffic Commission, the room over there is probably going to be too small, so I would suggest that maybe we can use this room if it's available.
Absolutely. So, October 15th, 6 o'clock, right here in the City Council chambers.
President, does the MBTA need more time? We can push it back to November if they do.
No, we're actually getting to the point where if we can't reach a decision, probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have to pull back service back to Lynn Central. So we need an answer very soon.
And if anyone has any questions for the MBTA, I believe the number was 617-222.
3,200.
3,200.
That's our...
You don't have to just call your counselor, you can call them too. But I'll be there if you call me.
Is that 6100 official number of
is our official number.
Thank you.